Hello, everybody. I'll let you all connect to sound. Hi, everyone. Hello. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 739th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Laurie Simmons and Charlotte Kent. We're thrilled to welcome poet Jennifer Michael Hecht here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter and that here in New York, we're on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land that we're speaking from. And now it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce today's guest and host. Since the mid-1970s, artist Laurie Simmons has staged scenes to create images with intensely psychological subtexts and nonlinear narratives. By the 1980s, Simmons was at the forefront of a generation of artists, predominantly women, whose use of photography began a new dialogue in contemporary art. Her work is included in many permanent collections worldwide. The Modern in Fort Worth and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago presented a major retrospective of Simmons's work titled Big Camera, Little Camera in 2018-19. And our host today, Assistant Professor of Visual Culture at Montclair State University, Dr. Charlotte Kent, has a particular interest in historical frameworks for art practices, with a research focus on contemporary digital culture and the absurd. Charlotte is an editor-at-large for the Brooklyn Rail. And with that, it's my pleasure to pass it over to Charlotte.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Laurie, thank you for being here with me today. As you all can tell, I am recovering a little bit, so I'm a little froggy. Bear with me with the sips of water that will entail. And hopefully no coughing. We'll do my best. But Laurie, with that aside, thank you so much for joining and talking about this most recent body of work.
It's my pleasure. Hi.
I wanted, before we dived in totally into the latest work that you've been doing, just to talk a little bit about, over this career of, producing photography, but also working with moving image and so forth. Just to sort of ask some questions around, because photography has meant so much to you and because photography has often been such a disputed practice and like definitions around it, when digital photography came out, people questioned whether that was photography because of how it was materialized. How do you think of photography? Like when you
How do I think of it now in this current moment?
Yeah, or how have you thought about it over the years and it's changed?
I think the most interesting and salient point for me is the fact that and this is so hard to believe because now, of course, it's the dark ages, but that picking up a camera as a tool for art was actually a radical thing to do in the mid-70s. And it's so hard to imagine that with the proliferation of both cameras, iPhones, images, image banks. But the decision back then not to be a painter, not to be a sculptor, but to kind of embrace a media that was barely being embraced by the world or museums. I mean, when I picked up a camera, photography was about 130 years old. So it wasn't, so I had had a very traditional art school and art background. So trying to learn the history of photography I did it. It wasn't a great challenge because it was so new. What I think is the most interesting thing is the difference between then and now, the fact that we are inundated with images. We live in an image world. And I'm still not sure how to answer the question of what photography means now. Maybe you can answer it.
Well, I mean, I think it's just, it's such an interesting thing because photography has gone through so many different, moments. It was this, initially so much of it was so interested in like capturing, the scene, portraits with families. And like there was that sort of, and then with modernism, you get this huge interest in like sort of artsy photography, right? Like the sort of what can we do? How can we alter the image? How can it not just represent what's there, right? And then it sort of returns because of installation art, looking for documentation and land art and so forth, like right, this return to the sort of seeing what's there. And then it does feel like, your practice, the other photographers of your, who were sort of interested in photography at the same time that you were, started to do something slightly different. It became less this kind of like bouncing back and forth between total abstraction and like, the sort of surrealist photography practice or like pure documentation. And something else started to come out during that moment. And that does feel relevant to today, like what happened, especially, I associate it with the 80s, but because it was about sort of finding with photography the ability to both somehow document, but also tell stories, begin to create new visions. And I feel like that's something that is what people love to do with photographs now through their mobile devices.
Mhm. Well, I think in terms of mobile devices and iPhones, I think that speaks to Warhol's prediction about everybody's 15 minutes of fame. I think that when I started out, the choices, I saw the polarities as being someone like Helen Levitt, who went out on the street with her camera, and Man Ray, who created, or Rodchenko, people who created pure surrealism and fantasy. And then there was what was going on at the Museum of Modern Art that was being controlled by John Sarkowski, which seemed to be all men documenting the world around them, finding the decisive moment out in the street. So that's where I found myself in the beginning, having to make those choices. But I feel like we've come such a long way to this point where people are really turning their cameras on themselves. I mean, that's the obsession, from reality TV to TikTok to Instagram to Twitter even. And these are things that I'm really fascinated by, I have to say. I have maybe I have too little resistance. I think we talked about this before. I feel like I'm almost too open to this kind of investigation of how it's being done. I mean, those of us who've dabbled with TikTok know that you go down a rabbit hole and you can be gone for 6 hours and not know where you've been.
I mean, I think that's true for all of these sites, right?
Right.
But I mean, there's no, it's no small thing that with social media, we get this whole new, thing called the selfie, right?
Mhm.
Which is the photograph of the self. I remember someone, trying to explain to me there was also this whole thing called the USSI. That word never really quite caught on the same way.
Good. It's good.
But I'm just wondering, this sort of your willingness to be open and, this sort of curiosity that's been like taking you into, every new place that you've gone. Um, where do you think that comes from? Is that partly from the practice of, having to find your own way early on because there wasn't like an established photography field in this sort of rigorous way? Or is that just innately who you are?
Well, I think going in the Wayback Machine, going back to junior high school or high school, I was a really terrible student in a very competitive post-World War II suburb. I never felt like I really belonged there. And my brain wasn't wired for math. My brain wasn't wired to learn a language. And I remember I had an older boyfriend who introduced me to jazz. And when I first heard jazz, I felt like I was finally hearing a language that I could understand. I started with like basic Dave Brubeck and ended up with Bill Evans and his piano and conversations with myself, where he played, he taped himself and played over himself. And I thought, I remember listening and thinking, I understand this language. I get this. This is the first language outside of English that's ever made any sense to me. And I was really excited about that discovery. And I've always been an artist. I've always identified as such because it gave me a kind of freedom to be weird in my own family. You know, they could dismiss anything I did as, that's Laurie, she's an artist, she's different. But each time I found something that felt like another language, I got really excited. And photography was that for me. I did not study it in art school. I walked out of my photography class. I thought it wasn't art. As I mentioned, I had a very traditional education: sculpture, printmaking, painting, ceramics, jewelry making, you know, everything, design, everything you could think of. And then when I got to New York and I started to understand what photography was doing, in the sense that it was documenting the most progressive, the most cutting edge kinds of work, whether it was Gordon Matta Clark hacking a house in half and photographs that represented that, or Barry LeVay walking around a gallery, or placing stones in places. I got really excited again by what the potential of what a camera could do. And I have to say that feeling, and again, I want to just say right off the bat, I'm a neophyte. I know that AI is very new. It's a new world for many people, although there are people that are way more entrenched and established than I am. But AI, the programs excite me in the same way that first jazz did, in the same way that first picking up a camera did. So I think that it's a general openness to new languages and new ways of thinking that it, you know, keeps me on my toes and it interests me.
I love this idea of it being a new language because it does sort of feel that way, right?
Mhm.
And I want to just go ahead and dive in as, we're looking at the various different images that are going to be scrolling through along the side. We'll come back to them later. We'll talk about some of the specifics, specific images and sets and so forth. But just so the audience gets a view overall of some of the practice that's been generated over this last little while. AI has been in and out of the conversation for, let's say 10 years or so. But in the last couple years, there have been these new text to image generators that have really sort of increased interest. And I'm just wondering at what point you sort of went, like your eye turned and went, that I need to try that. What was it that happened, or what did you read about or hear about that got you saying, for me?
Well, the people that I work with in my studio, you know, my studio assistants are quite a bit younger, and they're really great people. And one of them is particularly interested in AI, in NFTs, in crypto, and all of the stuff that I was curious about. So she's sort of been, her name is Danielle, and she's sort of been my trip guide through a lot of this. And, you know, once she set up the program, when we first tried to get into DALL-E, which is the program that I've been using, we couldn't get in. It was a closed program. Now it's open to everyone. But she sort of facilitated and I don't even, the hands fell off the clock after the pandemic. I don't know if something is 4 weeks ago or 4 months ago or 4 years ago, but it hasn't been very long that I've been working with it. But I think it's for anybody who's listening in who doesn't know, the AI program of DALL-E is basically text to image. So you feed a sentence into the program, and an image comes out. So it's language to image. And I think when I started doing it, I think I was hooked right away because I didn't know how it was happening, but I felt like pictures were coming out that looked like my work. And I still don't know how it's happening. And I don't know if I want to know how it's happening, but it's happening. So I was kind of joking and saying that I was like an AI whisperer, because I was so happy. I was feeding a sentence into the program and then getting images. And I was so happy with everything that I was getting. I was loving what I was getting. and I don't know if we should differentiate, but this is one of my older photos. It's from 2000, and the prior photo is an AI photo. And I don't even know, or an AI image. I don't even know if we should differentiate, but there's a little bit of a mix here of the AI stuff and my camera stuff, my lens-based stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting thing. There's so many questions that need to kind of be like, I remember when we spoke first, just like, do we differentiate between the photographs? Like, do you share a prompt, right? Like with this new practice, there's all these new questions that arrive around how you integrate it. And one of the things that many people who work with AI often talk about is like having to figure out how to put text into the machine to make it give you the images you want. But you describe almost immediately getting images that interested you, whether you decided to click them or not,
Like
right?
day one, yeah, day one.
So what is it about you and prompts that seems to work so well?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I think my prompts are very simple. I mean, it's kind of eerie. It's a little bit eerie. And even the stranger part is that there are some days that I get up and I want to work with the program and nothing happens. It's like I have bad days and good days, and I don't feel like my prompts are any different, but whatever, I don't know. I have the language to talk about so many things, but I don't have the language yet to talk about AI. And I thought it was really funny that I was on in a discussion called Art and Technology, because my relationship to art and technology, of course, is Rauschenberg. And I'm not a Rauschenberg historian, but his relationship to art and technology, EAT, Experiments in Art and Technology, that he did in 1960 with Tingley and various other artists, and his collaborations with
Billy Klufer.
Sorry?
With Billy Klufer, worked with him on
Yes,
EA.
Bell Laboratories and all of that stuff. And I think EAT made, the goal of EAT was to make new technologies available to artists.
Mm-hmm.
So is it art and technology is decidedly not new. It's new technology, but art and technology has been, that's been around a long time.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think it's interesting, it was funny. I was just talking to students last week, sort of doing a review of some stuff, oil paint and tubes was a technology, and it radically transformed painting, right? There's, arguments like I made that because of photographs, certain types of painting started to emerge. It's that notion of the fleeting image of the impressionist had a stronger draw, simply because this was like a notion that people were sort of grappling with because of the kind of capturing the moment of the photograph, right? As opposed to the idea that the painting was somehow this like held moment, an event in time, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think we can go back in time. Like there's endlessly ways to sort of point out art and technology's relationship. But to your point about Rauschenberg, I mean, Rauschenberg was also a photographer, right? And there's something about photography's relationship to wanting to cultivate more connections, it seems like, around new technologies and doing something with it. But I also can't help but feel like your relationship to text, to writing, to words, is a part of also what appeals around, or why you maybe have some kind of interest or ability with prompts, right?
Yes, I really love language. I'm really fascinated by language, even though I'm not fluent in any languages. I'm fluent in English, and I really do love writing. And I remember years and years ago, when I was very young, in my 20s, going to a psychic who told me that I was a writer and I was going to be writing, and I was going to write a movie, and I was going to be writing essays. And I thought, I can barely string a sentence together. And then as soon as I was able to write on a computer, I just couldn't stop writing. And now that's another thing that I do in my own practice, is to write about other artists. I've written scripts. I've written essays. and I'm fearless about writing now, and I love writing. And it came into my life much later, and it came when I started to be able to work on a computer. Prior to that, I tried to write, and I would write on yellow pads and then cut them apart and glue things together. And it just, the editing process didn't work for me. It didn't work for my impatient temperament. So for the last 25 years, I have been writing, and I do love language. So the idea of the marriage of language and images is it's a little bit of a dream come true. Just like the internet was a dream come true in a way, for being able to find images for my work. And, so many things happen for me in technology that I feel like I've been waiting for. And if I'd had access to Photoshop at the very beginning when I was making my work, I would have probably burned out really quickly, because I could have done everything I wanted to do without making these little setups in my studio. I mean, I find that the world provides me, the world gives me an abundance of subject matter, like I can't keep up. And I'm kind of, this romance with AI is new. It might burn out. It might be a one-night stand. I don't really know what's happening yet, but right now it's really this marriage of these two aspects of my work are really exciting for me.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, I mean, do you also enjoy reading? Is that like another part of, or is
Yes.
it
I love to read. And there was a long period of time, I think, when I was trying to make work, and I had young kids, and I also have the estate of an artist who died of AIDS in 1990. His name is Jimmy DeSannon, and there's currently a retrospective of his work at the Brooklyn Museum. For a long time, I couldn't read. I just couldn't find the time to read. It was like exhaustion. But reading fiction is really my only true escape. I love movies. I binge on television. I love looking at art. I love listening to music. But reading fiction is really the only place where I feel like I really get away.
Is there a particular type of fiction that draws you in, or?
It seems to me that since the pandemic, I've been reading mostly fiction, like tearing through fiction by mostly female writers, a lot of young Black women writers, just coincidentally books that are recommended to me. I just finished a book. The last two books I read were An American Marriage, and then the book about gaming, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And I basically take recommendations I have friends who are great readers, and I just take recommendations, and they're on my Kindle. Also, I feel like another technological advance is the Kindle, which makes it, for some reason, reading on a Kindle and not seeing a book cover and not knowing anything about the book makes it a more immersive experience for me. Sometimes I don't even know the name of the author. I'm just, I put it on my Kindle and I open it up and I start the words, and then I have to go back and research things about the author's life, get the cover blurbs, things like that. So it's a place where I can go that feels like it's almost like a vacuum on the space that I can enter. That's really comforting to me.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a sort of lovely thing reading. And okay, well, obviously I like to read, but when you're producing the images, how do you start to decide when this is an image you're going to keep working with, or when it's an image you're going to abandon when you're working with AI? Are there similar things to when you're looking at, having set up, a whole studio set up and taken hundreds of images, and then you're going through the individual ones? Is it a similar type of process, or is there something different that's happening there?
I usually like to get it right away. It's sort of like, you put the cake in the oven and you take it out when it's baked. I've gone in and tried to edit images, but much less frequently. I mean, there are crazy people who are really better versed in AI than I am, know that there are these distortions that are inherent to the program. like, I've tried to do cocktail parties with canapes and drink colorful drinks. And then suddenly one of the women at the party has hot dogs for fingers, like literally hot dogs for fingers. And, things happen that are so, like, the only word I can think of is goony. These really goony things happen. And then I try to go back in and maybe edit a section, but it has to be for me like a kind of a splat. I have to kind of get it. And I know when I'm in the rhythm. That's the part that, and I really longing to talk to other people that work in the program. I've talked to a few friends about what they experience, because I still, as I said before, I don't understand why there are days or moments when I get what I want, and other moments where nothing works and sort of crazy things appear too.
Yeah, I mean, that does seem very somehow normal though, right? Like a normal part of an art practice. There are days that work and days that don't. But
Exactly. But that's what's so strange about it, because I'm better equipped to explain why there are days that don't work when I'm when I'm shooting in the studio, than I am to explain why there are moments that don't work when I'm working with the program.
Mhm. What made you realize that you felt like you were ready to put a collection of images together to start
Um,
presenting them beyond just sort of as trials and experiments?
I have to say that it's been the encouragement of people from the outside,
Mm.
and I've had a lot of guides, people who've approached me, who have talked to me, Anne Verhollen and Alejandro Cartagena, who connected me to Claire Silver, and these are all people, and the fellowship. People have reached out to me, and the most interesting thing that happened, one of the most interesting things that happened, was that Jennifer Stockman and Nancy Spector, who were working with Deminti, reached out to me and explained a lot of stuff, and they referred to artists in the art world that I came up in as legacy artists, and I'd never heard that term before. The idea that the art world and the people that I know are called legacy artists. And I've always been interested in the idea that there are many art worlds, many micro worlds, many ways to make art, many ways to be an artist. And people in the so-called legacy art world are not super open to that. And this is not a criticism, this is just the way it is. When you're in your own world, you think that's the only world, but there are many worlds. So I also found it interesting, these conversations, and I was very shy about doing it, reluctant to start, but I feel like the people that have been guiding me, I've never felt like I've had mentors. I'm one of those people. I've never attracted mentors in my life. I've always been kind of, a lone wolf, kind of a rogue, I've always gone rogue. And the idea that at this point I have people that are guiding me is also, it's wonderful. It's very humbling, and it's very gratifying. So I feel like I have, again, I'll use the word trip guides because I come from the LSD era. I'll use that's as good a word as any, but I have people that I can talk to about it, and people that I can bounce ideas off of. And they actually ended up probably giving me the confidence to push it outside the studio.
That's really great. I'm just wondering, since Claire happens to be in the audience, maybe we could ask her to join us for a couple of questions. Chloe, would that be possible?
Hi, Claire.
Claire, I've just allowed you to unmute now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, so good to talk to you again. This is
Yeah.
wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
So great to hear your voice. Yep.
Claire, I just figured since you are here, and I know that you have been really supportive of Laurie through this process, maybe you could share with us all a little bit about how you were introduced to Laurie's work and what you started to see in it that made you think, yes, like this needs to be out there. I'm interested in this. I want to help sort of organize a show of some of these images.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was introduced to Laurie through Alejandro and fellowship in the context of this incredible collection. And the themes in Laurie's work, I sort of instantly picked up on this kind of uncanny sort of feeling. It was images of housewives and scenes of sort of suburban life that were Stepford isn't the right word, but it spoke to me as someone that has played with these concepts in my own work. And so I instantly saw a connection with AI and being able to lean into kind of the subtext of the uncanny and the real and the unreal. And I thought it was brilliant. Was able to help curate some of the collection, and that was a highlight of my entire life. Thank you so much, Laurie.
Thank you, though. Really.
But they are absolutely fantastic. And I love how naturally, like looking at the pieces, I instantly think of you, right? We often hear that AI is missing the artist's fingerprint. That's not true here. And I think it just needs someone that knows what their vision is. So that was really cool to see.
Whoops.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't realize was still muted. I try and mute myself and then I forget. But, Claire, I'm just realizing, I have the honor of knowing a little bit about you, but we, didn't get a chance to introduce you. Could you just briefly tell us a little bit about, you're an artist and your practice, and so how you come to AI?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was muted again for some reason. Technology. Yeah, so I am an artist. Thank you. I am still surprised to be able to call myself that, because when I was working with AI in the beginning, I wasn't sure that anyone would agree that it was art, but that is slowly changing, which is fantastic. I came to AI, I had a chronic illness that ended my prior career, and I taught myself to paint in an interim out of boredom while I was recovering from that, remission from that. And so I found AI around the same time. There were no code tools around the first time, 2018. That was sort of when they started, and it was just happened to align. So I started making thousands and thousands of images with these text. At the time, they weren't text, now they are, but curation sort of based AI programs. And out of those thousands, maybe 5 to 10 I thought were good enough that I'd ever show them to anyone. And of those, maybe 1 or 2 were enough that I would think maybe this would be something that I would like to continue working on and sell. And so I started trying to sell the work and trying to get it in front of some galleries, and it's slowly kind of built since then. But the technology has evolved so tremendously. I mean, it was a year ago, grainy sort of dash cam looking footage, and now it's full photorealistic, incredible images. And so I've been exploring, gosh, text to 3D, text to film, been doing a lot of animation. The literature movement with AI and poetry is really evolving as well. And I think as more established sort of legendary artists like Laurie come in and start using these tools and exploring the freedom that they give to kind of branch out, I think we'll see the tools evolve tremendously and mainstream adoption come along, which will be an explosion, a Cambrian explosion of art at that point, for better and for worse. So we'll see what happens.
Laurie, you've spoken about how many people have been supportive, but I also know that, there have been, when you've posted some images on Instagram, people were also sometimes negative. This is something that you're not alone in experiencing, right? What has been your response to that kind of reaction? And I thought of it just because Claire was just speaking about the way in which people didn't think of this type of work as art, right? How did you deal with that initial negative response?
I don't care. I mean, I just think that people are just, and Claire's probably so much better versed in the resistance and the negativity that people display. In fact, I was going to read some quotes from Claire's website because they move me so much. Some of her ideas about the future of AI and what AI really is. But of course, people are resistant. I remember when the Museum of Holography opened in Soho when I was a young artist. There's always technology. People flipped out when when the printing press was invented, we could go through the history of the world and people's resistance to what's new. And I always think it's kind of funny on my Instagram when people say this is the end of art, or this will make artists lazy. Well, first of all artists are lazy. Of course we're lazy. We're always looking for the quickest way to get to our ideas, and anything that can speed up that process is nothing but positive. I mean, we want to get there. I don't know what else to say. We work all the time, but we're also incredibly lazy. I'm speaking for all artists everywhere. That's not an appropriate thing to do, but I just think, of course, there's resistance. How could there not be?
What were some of the quotes from Claire's website that struck you? Do you remember any of them?
I have to pull it. I have to figure out how to pull them up.
Okay.
And I wonder, I wish, unless Claire wants to just read them from her purpose. Would you want to read?
I can do that. Yeah.
Read from your purpose, because your purpose, what you have on your website, is that part is incredible.
Well, thank you. I also have to pull it up to read the purpose, and I will be very embarrassed while doing so, but I will do that. I know one of the, you know what, I should probably just save it, because if I truncate, I will make it not as eloquent.
Yeah,
okay.
it's really eloquent.
Oh God, this is embarrassing. I'm on my website. About, here we go. Okay, so purpose. I explore themes of vulnerability, trauma, disability, social hierarchy, innocence, and divinity, and question the role they'll play in our transhumanist future. I do not make statements on whether AI is good or bad. I'm a caveman painting fire. With the rise of AI for the first time, the barrier of skill is swept away. Taste is the new skill. What comes next will be the cream of humanity's entire creative lineage. It's imperative that we as a species take this moment to recognize the transcendent longing inherent in being human and commit to bringing it with us into our future. That's my purpose. I'm embarrassed, but yep.
I'm so glad you read it and I didn't have to.
Thanks.
I think it's an interesting moment. I mean, the way in which, Laurie, you're speaking about, struggling to describe how AI works, and Claire, your sort of unwillingness to discuss the good or the bad. There's something about something being so emergent, so still in development and in practice, that maybe makes it important not to define or determine, right? That there is still this kind of experimental phase that is happening, in no small part because the technology is just rapidly developing every couple months. I wonder if you think, as it sort of finds its borders or its boundaries or sort of its place of being, it will be different. Like the excitement, the sort of, there's a kind of almost gentle, like not gentle, there's a kind of gentleness to the images, like that sort of first scene kind of moment, that makes it maybe almost seem fragile, right? Like it's a fragile moment to be working with this, where you can kind of try all these different things. And when something gets normalized, right? Something about it changes. I'm wondering if you've even looked that far ahead, right? It can be hard, but the present is so real.
Well, I wonder where it will go. I wonder, the way the world goes, sometimes when I think like a child, I think, I wonder when it will get evil. I mean, the internet brought us so many things, the internet brought us the Arab Spring, but look at all of the other things that, the internet is responsible for and produces. And, the internet in a certain way is like walking into a big scary ocean with big waves. There's so much stuff that goes on. And right now, for me, AI feels very comforting and very almost childlike and very new and very warm. And I'm looking at this portrait I did of my daughter and her dog. It looks like her. I don't know how it happened, but it feels sort of cuddly, but I don't know how it will go, how I will feel, what I will make. I'd really love to hear what Claire thinks in terms of, I mean, I'd be really curious if Claire's still with us to hear what she thinks will happen.
Claire,
Maybe she.
I don't know. I think she may have disappeared. But while you're talking about, while we wait to see if she can come back, you
Okay.
mentioned your daughter and this dog. You also have this whole series of walking your dog.
Mhm.
And I have this really hard time because every time you bring it up, right, I think, right, it's, Laurie is walking her dog on a lane. And then I have to go, wait, no, this is not like, I have this struggle moment where it both is a kind of self-portrait, and then I have to remind myself that it isn't a self-portrait the way I think of, like, you were walking on the street and you snapped a pic, right? That this is a generated image. So I'm wondering just how do these feel to you, like portraits or self-portraits? Like, how, because I totally get it, because I do the same, like, that language comes out for me too. And then there's that moment where I try and like insert the reality of the technology, somehow making it not be that. How do you
These feel like the portraits of me with Penny on the road, and I use the name of the road. And this looks startlingly like the road where I walk Penny. Startlingly similar, and most of them do. And I have no explanation for that. I mean, this is when I get into, sort of kind of strange territory, because I don't know what to say. I don't know how to explain it. This is a very, yes, that's some strange alternate universe version of me and my dog, but it feels like a version somewhere of me and my dog.
Yeah, it's a strange, I feel like these words are having to expand to sort of encompass these new experiences we're having. It's just,
And I also don't like being at a loss for words, but then in another way, this is the beginning of something. So maybe there's no, that's the only option, is not to be able to explain it. So
I know you work.
Sorry, go ahead.
I know you worked with Claire closely on the sort of curation of this set of images that are being released with fellowship. What was that like, just sort of going back and forth with someone like that about which pictures to?
I didn't. Claire did it on her own. Claire was given a pretty large group of photos, and the way she structured them was really interesting, because she obviously studied my work and made connections between series that I'd already done and then AI pictures that I made. So it was all Claire. I didn't curate it. She was the curator. So we didn't go back and forth. I was shown the group of works that Claire curated, and I think I had the option to change something if I wanted to, but I just liked it the way it was.
Did you have those previous sort of collections in your practice in mind as you were generating the AI images?
I think it's more of a matter of, as Claire said, it's a matter of taste. It's just that there are certain images that I'm drawn to. And I feel like in all the years that I've been making photographs, if I had to boil it down to a sentence, it would be a woman in an interior space. Even if it's women swimming, in a swimming pool, somehow my lens makes that an interior space. So I think I've been like a dog with a bone, no pun intended, with my dog in the picture, but I think I've always held tightly to certain subjects. And I just keep going over them and over them and over them, and redigesting them and re-chewing them and mulling over them and gnawing on them. And I think that when I started to feed information into, when I started to do the prompts in AI, I was just looking for the same images. I feel like in some cases I've made the same image 100 different ways. And so this is just a continuation of what I want to see.
Mhm. I mean, it's fortunate that you've been able to sort of pull from the machine this aesthetic that it makes so much, that is so related. Um, just because I think it's interesting, this idea of like women in interior space. I'm wondering if we could go to um, image 35 or 36. And the next one, actually, yeah. Just because this is another example of like, it's an outdoor space, right? But the way in which everything is set up, there's a kind of encircling that happens, and so that it has this kind of in like wrap around interiority thing that's happening again. As soon as you said that, it became really notable. There's a there's the image 39, Chloe, is really beautiful. And it reminds me of a sort of classic image that oh, sorry, I guess the next one, 40. You know, here, like these two sort of lines of like the women sort of looking, the women, the mannequins, the screen, it's this is just classic you, right? And there's like this way in which across these images, like I can't even imagine how you develop, like how this prompt happened, like how you were able to create this image.
Well, I wanted to do, and obviously the sky's the limit, but I have 40 years of my own work to draw from. So I'm not, certainly with AI, I wasn't going to start working with images of Santa Claus and candy canes. I haven't, something I never explored, but I have done groups of work of figures of women looking at art, looking at monuments. So I really wanted to go inside museums and see what would happen. I mean, that's really interested me. I found it really interesting to see what the program would do with their idea of museums and exhibitions and art, looking at art. That really grabbed me, that idea. And we did many of them. And so, some of them are really abject failures, but they're also, as I'm, the thing about making this work is that I make it so fast that I've seen things today that I've looked at a few times, but I don't look at them with the same depth that I look at the photos that I'm making, because first I shoot through a camera and then I edit images and then I print images, and these are just being generated at a pretty rapid rate. But
Do you not edit them afterwards? Like some people will take their AI images into Photoshop and continue to edit them in some way. You haven't started to do that yet?
No, we do it within the DALL-E program, but not very much. That's why my thing is to be able to get them right away. I think that might be a future, part of the future of what I do, taking an image and really going into it. But I think that I'm at that point where I'm so delighted with what I'm getting. And I'm also at the same time, I'm self-conscious, and I'm thinking someone who really, really has been working with the program for a long time probably sees the flaws that I don't see. And, I've made 2 movies, and I also, when I made my movie called My Art in 2016, I felt like a young filmmaker, a new filmmaker, and I was always terrified of making these like filmmaking 101 mistakes. But that also can be really exciting, that fear of really screwing up and trying to learn on the job. So there's a lot of that aspect. This is what I'm getting, and I'm excited with it for now. And maybe when I become a little bit more savvy or a little bit more sophisticated, I'll want to go in and really, and really sort of make it spiffier in some way. But I don't know. I think you can get that it is hard for me to talk about it. And I'm still sort of amazed by it. So it's the honeymoon phase, I think, of working with it,
Totally. But I mean, I think that that's also part of what this moment is so much about, right? And why it means so much that, someone with a history of, a photographic practice the way you have is using this. I mean, it's just this is a really exciting moment for a new way of making images, right? And, for all that I use words a lot about the visual realm, as a writer, I mean, I find myself often saying, like, I just don't know that we want to define things yet, like, especially because I work with things in emergent technologies. Like, maybe we just need to give the artists a little bit more time to do what they do before we start to carve out, categories and catalogs and terms and definitions, because as soon as that happens, it becomes, I think it creates it creates a sense of enclosure. Like, there's a reason to keep things loose and unknown and unable to articulate.
Yeah, and also I think that if you want to know what kind of warp speed the world is moving at, I started using this technology in 2022, and Claire started in 2018, and I revere her and her expertise. And we're talking about a 4-year period, of someone using a program. And, what do people generally say about expertise? It's like 10,000 hours or 100,000 hours or, so it's just things are, it makes me think about what will be at hand a year from now or 2 years from now. I think you brought that up before.
And it's hard because, I mean, the other thing is that I will just say, I think the word AI is so problematic, right? I mean, for one, that encompasses so many different technologies, so many different ways of making images. It's gotten sort of attached to this one particular practice for the moment, right? And, it creates a certain amount of, like, just the terms, like artificial intelligence, like all kinds of things sound scary about those two words, right? And so I think, even that alone is really worth sort of considering. Maybe eventually we will need to find new terms for some of these things.
Yeah.
And we can blame MIT for the fact that we use AI. Like, most of the scholars at Carnegie Mellon wanted to use complex processing systems instead. But that was decades ago, and AI stuck, and here we are. But the images are fantastic, and this show is, it's such a pleasure that it's launching. And I want to give a chance to the rest of the audience to ask you questions as well. So with that, I will hand it back to Chloe to moderate the Q&A.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Laurie, for that amazing conversation. We have so many audience questions, so I'm going to open it up to the floor here. The first one is going to be from Claire Silver. And so, Claire, I'm going to unmute you here so that you can ask Laurie your question.
Thank you. Hi. I just wanted to ask, and it's sort of a qualitative question, but I was curious how you found it felt when you started creating with AI. Was it like a natural sort of flow in? Was it limiting in terms of what you're used to? Was it surprising? Was it liberating? How did it feel? Because for me, that freedom is such a part of my experience, what drives me to do it.
It felt like all the positive words you said, none of the negative words you said. It felt like it was like an immediate, like what I talked about. I don't know if you were on the Zoom earlier, but when I discovered things that really got me excited from the get-go, like jazz or like picking up a camera, or like making a movie, or like acting in my daughter's movie, which was, one of the most exciting things I ever did. And then acting in my own movie. These new things that I do where I feel like I'm a little bit out of control, but a lot excited. And that out of control feeling, like, especially because I didn't know. I mean, one of the things I envy about you is that I think you, Claire, know a lot more about why and how the program is producing what it's producing. And I know nothing. And that makes it scary. That makes it exciting. That makes it feel like it's out of control. That makes it feel like it's going to really fail tomorrow. And that's, I must be releasing a lot of dopamine and a lot of oxytocin because every day I want to go back and do more. And, you know, there's definitely, there are definitely some synapses firing in my brain that make it a little bit addicting.
It is absolutely that. Thank you so much. And I won't stay and take up time in terms of talking, but if anyone
Well,
does
it's
have.
an honor that you're here. Seriously, I'm
Thank
so
you.
happy
It's such an
about
honor to
this.
listen to you. You're amazing. If anyone does have any questions about sort of what you mentioned, how it works, I could succinctly and quickly do that if that comes up. If not, that's fine.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Claire, and thanks for that response, Laurie. The next question is going to be from Jim O'Laughlin. Jim, I'm going to allow you to unmute here if you can.
Great, thank you. Hey, I was just kind of wondering in terms of how this work is done, whether people are taking AI output and then modifying it using kind of traditional artistic techniques, or is the point to just refine the search and get enough iterations until you get something that you feel is done?
I think that Charlotte might be better, it might be better for her to answer this. I know that people take their images and really work on them for hours and hours. I take them in Photoshop, but I actually don't know the answer. I don't have a succinct answer to that.
I mean, I would say yes. People do all of the above. This is one of the, I mean, it's a practice, so people have different approaches to it and are attracted to different parts of it. Some people like pushing the generations to see what can develop. Some of them like to do it and then pull back and then add stuff and other, you know, you now, as of a little while ago, you can mask certain sections so that you can just change certain sections of the image. Some people just want to be able to pull it out and do stuff to it directly in like a pretty traditional program, though let's all remember that Photoshop itself is using AI. And you know, some people want it to be the first off image. I think this is the point that we were sort of saying at the end. It's really about how do you as an artist want to engage with it? If you think of it as a tool that you can work back and forth with in whatever way suits you, there's a lot of flexibility.
Well, I think germane to that question, and interestingly, the young artist who got in trouble for submitting an AI picture, I don't know if it was a competition or an exhibition, but when he was questioned about it or called out about it, he bragged about how many hours he spent working on the image to boost the idea that it really was an artwork because I worked on it for 100 hours. And I'm, you know, in my case, I'm sort of thrilled that I give a prompt and wait 5 seconds. It's like a microwave oven, you know, you're heating up last night's Chinese food and it's ready. You know, you used to have to put it in, light the oven, put it in the oven, wait a long time. And now you can reheat your leftovers in 30 seconds. And I'm sort of thrilled with the immediacy. And I thought it was interesting that the young artist boasted about how many hours he spent on his AI artwork. I think you know what I'm talking about, Charlotte, that, yeah.
Thank you so much for that question, Jim, and thank you for those responses, Charlotte and Laurie. The next question is going to be from Lyle in the audience. Lyle, I will allow you to unmute here to ask.
Can you hear me? Is that
Yeah.
coming through? Oh, good.
Lyle.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi.
Nice to see you. There's a lot of things to unpack here, and I'm fascinated by this. I want to make a pitch as long as we're all together. SVA is going to run an AI conference. The MFA program in photo and video is going to run an AI conference at the end of March. And that's going to be, I think that's going to be fascinating. There's going to be a lot of people checking in, and it should be really a lot of fun. A couple of things came to mind, especially as I listened to you kind of talk about your fascination with the programming and the technology and just, as they say, the practice. It really strikes me that, and see what you think of this, something very strange is going on here in that the machine or the program, unlike sort of surrealism, I would say, it's actually the machine and the program that's doing the amalgamation. And it's almost like that unconscious process that the surrealists love so much has been almost completely offloaded to the machine itself. It's almost like the machine has become a substitute unconscious for artists, for anybody who chooses to begin to write the prompts. And even your reaction to it, that kind of spontaneous wonder at what comes up, it's almost like the machine's doing your dreaming for you. And I wonder if you want to just sort of respond to that.
Oh, I mean, you said it so well. I love the idea that the machine's doing my dreaming. I mean, I love the idea that I'm old enough that I could have experienced and participated in a classic psychoanalysis, lying on the couch 3 days a week for many, many years at a much earlier phase of my life, you know, where dreams were discussed in great detail, etc. Thoughts were obviously, you know, we all have some idea of what psychoanalysis is. And then I love what you said, because the program, it does feel like I'm looking at dreams. I mean, particularly the one that Charlotte held on with, the girl that's sort of me in the field of flowers with her sort of dog. I
Exactly.
just kept staring at that one and thinking, that's right out of my dreams. Just being, you know, it's just right out of my dreams. So I love the idea that you're bringing up, that it's a dream generator in some way. And
Let me, can I ask you one more question before then I'll get off. It's very clear that we have these massive databases, and obviously they're getting larger and their organizations more sophisticated all the time. Two things. One is that the kinds of images we get still seem to me to reproduce the sort of the perspective of the camera over and over again. We don't seem to get away from that. And going along with that, if that's the case, why make photographs anymore? I mean, is it possible that you'll never go back and make more photographs, that you'll just do this forever?
No, it's not possible. And I think one of the things that we're talking about, and the essence of what we're discussing, is the difference between control and chance. And, you know, there have been times when I've made series, and I remember years ago, I think it was like 1987, I said to my husband, I'm going to make a series of 4 petit fours, a vanilla, a chocolate, a strawberry, and a pistachio. And they're going to be on pink plastic legs. And the backgrounds are going to be bifurcated, and the top's going to be pink and the bottom's going to be blue. And I'm going to mix the colors around. I basically described the 4 photos I was going to shoot. And he, as a painter, was horrified that I was explaining exactly, that I was leaving nothing to chance, and that, you know, because his whole idea is that, you know, all writing is rewriting, all painting is a surprise, and in the process things emerge. And I made that series absolutely to a T the way I had described it to him. And that's the kind of control that an artist can exert in their practice. What's happening with the AI pictures is much more like a dream. Like, you know, you described it so beautifully. And I think that there are going to be times when I'm in the mood for my dreams, and times when I'm in the mood to control everything, control my environment, and take the pictures that I want to take when I know beforehand what they will look like.
Yeah, that's great. That's really interesting. Thanks, Laurie, so much.
Thank you for the great question.
Thank you so much for those questions, Lyle. Before I move to the next question, I just want to read something that Fellowship Trust just put in the chat. They said, I loved someone shared that they showed their child AI and how it produces images from text. The child responded, I want to go to sleep to dream so that tomorrow morning I can tell the machine what I dreamt and see what that dream looks like.
Oh my God,
The next question is from Gregory Eddie Jones. Gregory, I am going to allow you to unmute now to ask.
Thank you. Hi, Laurie.
Hi.
So I actually work with Fellowship, and I've had the pleasure of getting to spend a lot of time with this work over the past few weeks. And you know, the one thing that I love about it And maybe you could offer just kind of your own thoughts or commentary, but so much of your career is focused on making pictures that essentially work as imitations of the real, dolls and toys and things. And with this new work, in a way, you're kind of creating an imitation of your past work, revisiting subjects and themes that you've been exploring for decades. And I feel like AI imagery itself is this kind of imitation machine where it creates something that looks like a photograph. And I think we'll be debating this for years of whether or not we could actually call it a photograph. So like there are like these three nexes of different kind of forms of imitation that just seem to be spiraling into this crazy world of fiction that you've created. And I just wanted to say that I just really love just how complicated but how perfectly fitting this work feels, and how you've kind of used the technology to kind of create that dynamic.
Well, thank you for that. But I think that the inherent potential for the uncanny within the program it's really, I have to work really hard to get that in my work. I have to find ways to subvert scale, subvert color. It's my idea of the way that fake is real for me has sort of, been moving me along all these years. So it's all there for me to use in the very best way, because the nature of it, I don't know, maybe people would, I don't know, you might disagree, but the uncanny aspect of it is sort of baked into the program, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that contribution, Gregory. And thanks for that answer, Laurie. Our last question is going to be from Barbara in the audience on size of the works. Barbara, I'm going to allow you to unmute to ask directly if you'd like.
Hi.
Hi, Barbara.
Thanks for the great discussion. My question is pretty simple, actually, but it does get at what your expectations, how you might describe, Laurie, like the viewer reception, because I'm not clear on what the scale is for these displays. And in your earlier work, maybe that idea of things being, fluidly going from, the printed page of a book to, something on a gallery wall, like that question would have a different dynamic. But in this case, like, what are the sizes that you display the work in a gallery? Like,
well, I've printed them out as prints and pin them up in the studio, but I have no intention of displaying them right now. I think they have to exist in the digital space. They were born there. And I think right now they need to be raised there and live there. So I have no plans to do that right now.
Thank you for that. If I can just follow up then, like, is there some way that the idea of them remaining in the digital realm, like, does that add something significant to the work that that you feel is there that it would lose if it was physically presented?
I
really
don't
scale of the viewer, like my body in front of a print of this.
I don't really see that yet. I don't really see how that can happen. I think that I have to sort of play out all of the possible roads that I can take within the digital world, and the people that have been sort of mentoring me are working in that world. So it just doesn't feel right yet to make big pieces of paper. And I have a little bit of probably shouldn't admit this, but I wonder if other photographers feel the same way, but a little bit of printing, mounting, framing exhaustion. I have a little bit of object exhaustion at this point in my life. I've made a lot of things. I'm cluttering up the world with objects. And there's a beautiful freedom about not having to think of them as objects that I have to carry around or move around or get to galleries or, hire trucks to take from one place to another. That's part of, and I'm interested that we didn't talk about this earlier, but there's a real freedom in that for me. And I always describe myself as an object maker, an image maker, and an object maker, but I'm really enjoying not being part of that right now.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that last question. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you to all of you. Those were amazing questions. And at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with a reading. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Jennifer Michael Hecht to the stage. Historian and poet Jennifer Michael Hecht is the award-winning and best-selling author of the histories Doubt, Stay, The Happiness Myth, and The End of the Soul, and the forthcoming The Wonder Paradox, coming out March 7th. Her poetry books include Who Said, The Next Ancient World, and Funny. She earned her PhD in history from Columbia University and teaches in New York. And with that, it's my absolute pleasure to pass it over to Jennifer.
Hi, can we hear me?
Yes.
I'm delighted to be here. This is really wonderful. What an incredible, incredible program it's been. It was just fascinating. I could just ask questions, but instead I'll do my thing. So I became a scholar of doubt and disbelief. And what I learned from the history of religion and from giving talks and then hearing the audience encouraged me to go in a new direction. I advocates that all celebrate the religious rituals that they do already, but to have a slightly different take on it, a slightly more poetic idea, and indeed to add a poem, especially a poem from the great poetry of world poetry, so that we really transcend some difference. And also, if we all choose from the great poems, sometimes we'll have a few in common. And I think we should choose poems for specific human needs, ceremony, rituals, but especially for holidays. And with that, I will read from, I just got the actual copy of the book. It's so beautiful to have, The Wonder Paradox. So I'm just going to jump around a little. I invented the term the interfaithless to refer to the non-religious who feel positively connected to others through that identity. We have faith in the inter. We have community among our present day unbelievers and also with those in history who shared a sense that the real excitement is in art, nature, and love. I also call myself a poetic realist. It means I'm a science and reason person, and I use art and its ideals to understand experience beyond religious. Anthropology and sociology often use the sacred to explore what people hold sacred. Non-believers of every major religion have told me they take part in rituals without belief, often to please parents or a spouse. And some of them say they get a lot out of it. Religion offers scripts and actions for when we are scared witless, a place to take your body when you are gutted by grief or stunned with relief. Some of us have strong feelings against certain words or gestures, but can sense a lack in the loss of them and could use a reframing or a replacement. What about you? Do you have a potent way to sustain your sense of meaning, courage, peace, and awe? Do you have a coherent way of thinking about your occasional encounters with elevated experiences? I've been surprised to find waves of ocean metaphors that keep arising as I write this introduction and have kept them and let them interact with other metaphors. Listen, as a historian of science, I've come to respect and suspect metaphors for their capacity to control our thinking. And so in the present lyrical work, there's more accuracy than consistency in my similes. Mixed metaphors are the only ones I trust. The wonder paradox is the miracle that we are blown away by the experiences of consciousness. Religion and art invite us to a world bigger than normal life, into contact with the weirdness of our human situation. We live within paradoxes. We feel permanent, though well aware of death. The consciousness paradox is the startling fact that soft matter afloat in a bone bowl made Mozart's sonatas, Shakespeare's plays, and the whole astounding modern world. My favorite paradox is the one about wonder, the sublimely curious fact that we evolved materially as beings equipped with the ability to feel awe. The meat thinks and is amazed by the white stripe in the night sky and figures out that it is our galaxy. We can be dumbstruck by the beauty of a face or city, color, ocean, or song. We live with the turbulent, wild fact of wonder. With our white coats on, we might explain why we crave beauty, noting that facial symmetry signals a healthy partner. But explaining it doesn't explain it away. We still live these feelings. Part of the paradox of wonder for me, and by wide anecdotal report, is that thinking about it feels true, feels worth one's time. Considering our contradictions and embracing the weirdness of existence feels, when you are doing it, as if it is a valuable thing to do. And poetry can help us do it. I'll read another little piece, but part of what I mean by that is we understand how strange everything is, but it's hard to keep it in mind. Our brains kind of normalize, and poetry is where we can sort of hold on to that feeling. All right. When our daughter was born, we only caught our breath to have a naming ceremony on her second birthday. Not ideal, but it was fabulous. A friend who taught at a humanist Jewish school said some words and led us in song. My husband read a little poem I'd written, a list poem specific to our girl. We ate deli. My sister-in-law said she'd never been to one of these, and I told her no one had. We made it up. Can we do that? She asked. I bounced my head to show I had some trepidation, and then said that a humanist teacher had once said to me, when I'd asked a similar question, who's stopping us? She also said the Orthodox wouldn't recognize any ceremony you'd be comfortable with, so why are we wincing? Now I believe the right answer is not only can we do it, but we should do it. It's good for us, for the baby someday, the pictures, the story of the day, the poem may mean a lot. The interfaithless can do all different rituals, but in the same spirit. When we all invoke the poetic sacred by drawing from the same canon of renowned world poems, we'll feel each other's support. If the old ways seem awkward now, we need to find new ways to celebrate, especially for when we are flabbergasted and baby blasted by love and wonder, scared, half daffy and clinically exhausted. We can't believe we've done this, or that we can give all that needs to be given. And yet we can't believe our luck so far either, holding the tiny new being. All year long, we see the light in the garden break fire against the greenery and stone, hope and spleen, and can't believe the luck of it to be situated as to see the light like this, just as it is today. You deserve a moment to stop everything and celebrate it all. In this crazy mixed up world, we are all snowplow babies. Then summer comes and the greenery displaces snow with the boundless intention of youth with something to prove. 100 autumns, a call to be glorious. The garden is ephemeral, Yet Brooklyn is perennial. Something between the garden and the light is Brooklyn. The garden is what is created by our strange, sustained astonishment after all these years. A poem often published with the title A Jewish Blessing includes the lines, in every birth, blessed is the wonder. In every love, blessed are the tears. In every transition, blessed is the beginning. These blessings condense paradox into words, and they aid the magic of transition by getting us to say the word transition. Here's to love and to creation, to what doesn't last, to holding and letting go, and to the brutal, unsettled beauty that marks us forever and then moves on. I think I'll stop there. There's maybe a tiny paragraph. I'll give you one more, just that among the invented rituals that I offer, and I mostly tell people to do the ones they're already doing, but to think more deeply about them or in a different, more poetic way. But I made up the idea of the sacraments of misery, that a lot of us have little objects around the house. And if we gather a few, put them in a special box and only look at them when we're depressed, we can play with them while we're lying in bed. And then you put them away when you feel okay again. It lets you know what's going on. I tried it and it worked tremendously well for me. So I'm just going to read you the paragraph that is my first collection of them. I've clustered mine in a card catalog drawer next to my desk. I brought the old kaleidoscope disc of multicolored glass, turtle of glued crystals, tile from therapist's hallway, hand tall reproduction of Thin Man statue, thumbnail Lakshmi statue, pocket compass, tiny chair, Catwoman shot glass, millions of years old clamshell fossil, brass bell, cereal prize ring, polished labradorite, stone in the shape of a heart, antique teal enamel beetle brooch, and the dead bee that was in the card catalog box when I opened it. That's my favorite one. Okay, thanks so much for letting me read.
Jennifer, that was amazing. Thank you so much. That was incredible. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Thank you to Danielle at Laurie's studio. Thank you to Andrea Holland. Thank you so much for your support in preparing for today's event. And we'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making daily conversations like this one possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on our YouTube channel. For 22 years, the Rail has provided a platform for the arts, culture, and politics through our monthly publication and public events like this one, our daily NSE. You can check the chat for a link to donate to support the Rail. And if you're free on Monday at 1 p.m., do join us for a conversation with Sarah Wilson, Leo Costello, and Andrew Woolbright on the occasion of the exhibition To Speak of Everything, The Art of Raymond Mason, on view at New York Studio School. We'll conclude with a poetry reading by Jessica Grimm. And as is tradition, you can all now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good weekend.